I get that this is a strange time to defend the remake. Hollywood has never been more reliant on remakes, sequels, and reboots. There is a justified cynicism towards them as Disney churns out live action remake after live action remake. I get it. Remakes have a tendency to be unimaginative, merely playing off nostalgia or the hope that the same trick will work twice. In the last couple years alone, Snow White, How to Train Your Dragon, The Little Mermaid, and Lilo and Stitch have all been remade. In each case, they lacked the vision, intelligence, and craft that made the originals so memorable. And yes, Disney really have gone to town with these live action remakes. Beyond this, there is also the worrying trend of recasting well made foreign language films with American actors, seemingly to get round audience prejudice towards subtitles. No one saw the sophisticated force majeure and thought it could be improved by the addition of Will Ferrell, but this did not stop the misguided downhill being released. Similar treatment was given to the heartwarming and sincere French comedy The Intouchables, which became the cliché to the upside. Yet despite the torrent of poor remakes, many of our favourite films are themselves remakes. Even the bastion of cinema himself, Martin Scorsese, has succumbed to the trend. More than 3 decades after he directed his first film, he finally won the Best Director Oscar for The Departed, which is based on the Hong Kong crime procedural Infernal Affairs. Ultimately, films are defined by craft and vision rather than whether the story has been borrowed from elsewhere. The Departed is compelling because it is made with the same passion and feel for cinema that has defined Scorsese's long career, and not because it shares plot points with another film. Likewise, when legendary director Sergio Leone remade the samurai epic Yojimbo as a fistful of dollars, his sense of style and drama was so immense that he rejuvenated the Western genre and created what is now known as the spaghetti Western. Dracula has been adapted countless times, but Robert Edgar's recent remake of Nosferatu might actually be my favourite. Eggers is one of the most exciting directors working today and imbued the story with an overwhelming sense of dread and genuine evil. And what about the recent Dune films, which are technically remakes? They've both been excellent, with the third installment being among the most hyped films of the year. I know the David Lynch Dune film has its defenders, but it's an absolute mess, and the recent adaptations are better than it in almost every way. Denis Villeneuve has finally given the source material the adaptation it deserved. Some stories are so powerful that each generation deserves a chance to rework them. The Bradley Cooper directed A Star is Born is one of the better films of the 2010s, and is the 4th time the classic story has been brought to the screen. Even the 1954 version of the film, starring Judy Garland, which is seen by many as the definitive version of the film, is itself a remake. At their best, remakes can highlight the changing preoccupations of society and how our treatment of certain issues evolves over time. This is perhaps best illustrated with the wonderful All That Heaven Allows, and the 2 remakes that subtly recontextualize the film. When Douglas Sirk shot the original, the relationship at its center is condemned by society due to differences in class, indicative of the conservative conventions of the 1950s. 2 decades later, when the provocative German director Rainer Werner Fassbinder retold the story in Ali Fear Eats the Soul, it was issues of race that led to the relationship being condemned. In the early 2000s, Sirk's film was again reimagined in Far From Heaven. This time, Todd Haynes introduced homosexuality and sexual repression to the well-known story, allowing it to engage with more modern concerns and the personal preoccupations of the director. In the end, when the filmmaking is bold and inventive, it is unimportant where the inspiration came from. Since Bonnie and Clyde was released in 1967, There have been a number of brilliant films which have followed the Lovers on the Run formula. Badlands is in essence a remake of Bonnie and Clyde, though through dreamy visuals and a mystical score, Terrence Malick is able to create a singular and original story. There seems to be a double standard when it comes to remakes, particularly with highbrow adaptations that are usually exempt from the scrutiny of other reboots. When a film reworks Shakespeare, there is not derision but open mindedness. There are hundreds of Shakespeare adaptations, including more than a dozen based on Romeo and Juliet alone, and yet there is not the same negativity towards them that we see towards other remakes. And this is not to mention that Shakespeare himself borrowed stories from elsewhere. Hamlet, the most famous and revered play ever written, is largely based on a Danish folk tale. Likewise, Greta Gerwig's excellent adaptation of Little Women, the sixth time Louisa May Alcott's story had been filmed, was anticipated with the expectation that it would be a fresh and worthwhile retelling of the well-known book, and not simply a rip-off of previous incarnations of the film. Remakes have been part of cinema almost since its inception. To dismiss them is to reject both the history of film and the vision of many of its defining directors. Cheap and lazy remakes will always be badly received, but behind many a masterpiece is another film.